Check, am I audible?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, so preferred gender pronouns, there are no such specific things. Anything is fine. POI preference through chat box, because I don't like my speech are being interrupted. Setting up my paper and timer first. Wait a minute. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, the ideal world that we want is that the political discourse that is healthy, right? That they are debating or throwing any opinions based on the facts and evidence and not assumption or just unnecessary accusation, so on and so on and so forth, right? However, the problem right now is that this kind of utopian idea under the leftism brought lots of accusation toward the leftism using this kind of thing to accuse those kind of rightism people to begin with, right? And those rightism people are also just only trying to accuse or just saying lots of assumption, conspiracy theories upon these leftist people to begin with, right? And also notice that under the status quo right now, those kind of things are being overgeneralized by every single left spectrums to begin with, right? And also it creates to those kind of people that are try to characterize themselves or trying to picturize themselves as a leftist people, misusing this kind of thing because they don't really understand the idea of the utopic should be accessed only in the spectrum of far left to begin with, right? Because they think that what leftism should do is to having total egalitarian, total radicalism toward this whole broken systematic world to begin with, and what they want is to having such an ideal economic condition that are it's actually too idealistic to begin with, right? And we think that is because the overuse of utopian idea that seem to be very beautiful, very promising without those kind of people are realistic on how the world condition right now, on how the economic stability right now, and any other things to begin with, right? We say that the mechanization under the status quo right now is nothing, right? It's only that those kind of people are being criticized, and this utopic idea are being overused day by day. There are no such mechanism under our status quo right now, which this kind of thing is happen over and over again until the end of the days, right? So we say that under opening government, what we want is that disassociate this utopian idea from the leftism people inside of any political discourse to begin with, right? Because we say that that we don't, if this kind of thing happen at there are association of leftism with utopian, those kind of people, those kind of the doer in itself will get condemned and critics and lots of things, or even people will just dismiss this kind of people, like those kind of people will be judged by the whole society because we are no longer disassociating leftism from utopian. Now moving on to my contribution. So my contribution is that why this narrative is only harming the progressivity of leftism and even cannot create any betterment toward the mindset of our progressive people from the leftist people to begin with, right? Because of this several reasons. Firstly, most of leftist people are young people that want this kind of liberalism, that attracted by this very beautiful promise coming from this utopian idea in the end of the days, right? But notice that but they are nowadays are being too idealistic, but they don't never really understand better on this utopian idea. They just take it, oh, utopia is a perfect world that we should take, that we should earn in the end of the day. But they never try to really understand the current condition of the world, that there are still lots of any structural problem, there are still lots of any any problem inside of the government, problem inside of every single things that are, even the externalities also exist, which we see that those kind of young people also are, they are coping up with those utopian just only based on their idealistic, because they are still young, that cannot that don't really understand it well, that really well, right? And we say that being said, we say that it is only bring contradict toward the leftist agendas, which are toward the liberal agendas to begin with, right? Because they say that They want the progressivity and also economic fairness and also total socialism and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, they are still mass consuming a lot of things. They are still economically discriminate the poor people. They might also still discriminate certain other people to some extent, like not necessarily being racist, but they are discriminating people that are having less privilege than them and on any spectrum of their life to begin with, right? Which we say this is only hampering the liberalism or the leftism agenda, because to change that need change and more advocacy to reaching their main agenda, which is this kind of fairness and so on and so forth, right? We say that is bring harm because they're always protesting against the government. They're always using the rightism as it is create unhealthy discourse, and we say that it is creating an unhealthy discourse in the end of the day, right? Because those kind of progressive those kind of leftist agenda will only be seen as something that is inconsistent. In the other way, they say that they want this certain progressivity, but in the other hand, they also do such things that are not progressive, and any other things, right? We say that it will only bring harm because those kind of rightism will have the chance to criticize upon this kind of leftist agenda, which we don't want that to be happen in the end of the days, right? Which we say that this kind of thing will only bring harm toward the leftism agenda, and those kind of thing those kind of agendas cannot be achieved because in the end of the day, those opposition that are coming from Republican Party, for example, or any conservative party can just easily criticizing over the government, criticizing over the leftist people that are being not consistent in the end of the days, right? Now, and now moving on to the second agenda, right? Moving on to my second arguments, right? We say that this is only harming the political discourse, right? Why? Because people, right? These people are easy to, easy to outrage under this political discourse to begin with, right? Because they only throwing each outrage with each other. The leftist people are trying to accusing, and the leftist people and rightist people are trying to accusing each other without necessarily talking something that from different perspective and finally gain something or solution or with the respect that they want in the end of the day, right? We say that this kind of political discourse is unhealthy and toxic, and it cannot create any changes or even meaningful value, because we say that the political discourse that we need here is that something that is meaningful as a part of this participation coming from our society to help the government to recognize even more flaws and to repair the better and to create betterment to repair their systematic failure. And in the end of the day, those kind of participation are invalid because of this utopic word that are being overused and being misunderstood, and those kind of young people are still idealistic. Hence we say we should disassociate this with leftism. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for Prime Minister's speech, and I would like to call Leader of Opposition to start the speech. Here.
Am I audible?
For me, your voice is so small. Would you mind to speak louder?
Wait. Hello, am I audible? Is this fine?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, our stand is that we want this kind of leftists to be associated with this kind of utopia, right? And before that, before going to my rebuttal and substantive, several clarification, and I'm going to say that actually we as the leftist itself, we also don't like the people who only throw, for example, the conspiracy or not throwing the fact itself, but actually in the status quo itself, most leftists itself give this kind of proof toward the society on what actually happened, right? It's not like what the OG give the frame toward us, right? So several rebuttal toward the opposition opening government itself, right? They say that actually this kind of idealistic is actually harmful because these young people and etc. Right? And etc. Right? We say that this kind of young people having this kind of idealistic is actually very good, right? Having this kind of utopia, because actually they understand on what kind of government should be, on what kind of government that is appropriate for our country, for example. And that's the moment where, for example, this kind of young and progressive people asking and demand for the more progressive policy, for example, for example, the environment policy itself, right? So that's why we believe that the case coming from the OG is not stands, right? And our goal here is that we want to create the progress in the society through this kind of policy. For example, taking care of the issue that has never passed the Congress bill, for example, right? And we believe that this is very important in order to create changes in society, where we cannot abandon things such as, for example, environment issue. For example, the Congress itself, we don't talk about it, and that's why we want to create this kind of idealistic, and we want to propose and pass this kind of policy at the very beginning, right? So two things that I'm going to bring into this debate. The first one about the problem in the current status quo, and the second on how we can achieve this kind of progressivity itself. So going into my first thing about the status quo itself, well, actually what is being problematic in the status quo is actually we cannot pass the policy that is trying to create this kind of progressive changes, right? Or see the problem for example, like the Barney itself, they criticize McDonald for never hiring the wage of the employee because of the law, because the people have this kind of lobby, right? Because of the Republicans lobby this kind of thing. So that's why that kind of statement never been achieved, right? And we believe that this is the people who this is the people of conservative, because they never trust on the utopia. They underestimate this kind of thing, right? And we believe that this is very harmful. For example, they didn't take care of, for example, the ideal environment work. For example, the moment they abandon this kind of idealistic, they will never talk about this. It just simply because they think, oh, this is very idealistic, so that's why we shouldn't talk about that, right? But the moment this kind of, for example, the environment issue being abandoned, look on how suffer the people itself, right? On how this world is already damaged, right? On how the climate change itself is everywhere, everywhere, for example. But if this kind of idealistic leftist itself being ignorant, that's the moment where harm is will come by step, right? Because the ideal policy is being ignored itself, right? So going into my second thing on how we can achieve this kind of progressivity towards the society, right? Well, our proposal is that we want to keep associated with this kind of left-wing utopia, right? And before that, let's characterize on how this kind of on how these left-wing sides create what kind of policy, right? Well, we believe that they are very idealistic, of course, like what the utopia definition is. They, by this kind of the idealistic, they are willing to create this kind of progressive policy, for, let's say, for example, against the gun violence, or for example, they are very pro environment and etc. Right? We see that on how this kind of policy that is being very, very progressive, right? And we believe that what kind of benefit that we will get is that this narrative will be both by this moderate and the progressive people itself. First, about the progressive people, please note that this type of people are ideal one, right? They have the they are very young, they are idealistic, they want to create changes in the social media itself. They are willing to work hard to spread, for example, this kind of ideal policy in order to create the changes in the society or in the government itself. We believe that this kind of people will eat this kind of narrative, right? Because they also want to create this kind of changes. They also want to create the idealistic world, right? And also the majority of the voters is also the progressive people, so that's why this will help we as the leftists, we will help them to create the changes itself, and they will also help us to create the changes itself by spreading the education and etc. Right? For example, about the environment policy, right? They also want this, and we want this also, right? And by that they will spread about the awareness of the environment. For example, we will also get support from them to pass this kind of policy, because this is also within the interest of them itself. Second, about the moderate people itself, right? Well, we have to notice that actually moderate people is the one that actually put their eyes most on the government, that they really want the government to please the citizen itself, right? Well, what being problem in the status quo itself, this kind of moderate people think that the administration has no changes, right? They trust that actually the system is very corrupt, the current system is very corrupt, and they believe that they want to bought this kind of narrative, because they believe that this kind of narrative is very idealistic, and they believe that what they want, for example, a government that is very pleased their citizen, for example. This is the moment where they will bought this kind of narrative, right? So in our side, we will get this kind of more subscribers toward this narrative, right? And how we get this kind of progressive society or environment itself? Yeah, the moment where more people subscribe us, the moment people support our policy, for an example, yeah, that's the moment where politicians will subscribe us too, right? Because this kind of politician will see the demand coming from the society itself. They will create the policy which is suitable with the demand coming from the society itself. That's why we believe that this kind of politician also subscribe our narrative, right? They also become, and it become incentive also toward them to create this kind of idealistic policy, right? And also at the very first place, we also have to realize on that, right? We have to realize first on that. That's why we need this kind of narrative, right? And the moment if we already get past this kind of policy, and we will get supported, this kind of policy will be accepted, right? And this kind of policy will benefit all, right? Well, this will benefit the government who the leftist utopian government who really want this, and we will also benefit the society that actually want this, right? Proud to oppose. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for leading opposition. Now I'd like to call Deputy Prime Minister to start the debate here.
Kak, give me around 1 minute to minum bentar ya.
Oh, yeah, sure. Take your time. DPM, are you there?
Oke, Kak. Okay, let me set my timer first. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, before deliver my speech, my POI preference to chat and gender preference she or her. So I'm going to start my speech. 3, 2, 1. So ladies and gentlemen, misunderstanding that coming from the opening opposition, right? They never actually clearly said on how the stereotype or even the pattern of thinking on how the leftism utopia it's actually contribute in this world, for example, because of their only creating the like perfect world that never exists in even our current problem in our status quo right now, right? We say, ladies and gentlemen, the leftism itself is also aim for the equality of the outcome, We say that this means realistically that everyone has to receive the same amount, because there's no other fair way giving someone what they need while keeping everyone satisfied. That's the point that need to be understand on the opening opposition side. We say that in the current status quo right now about the portrayal of the left-wing utopia will only ruining the political discourse, like JJ said previously, because we found that the problem in the discussion about the freedom of individuals never at like the fault for their individual for their own situation in the discussion and discourse. The blame is all it's like the blame is always be on a certain group, for example, and etc. Hence, based on the problem that create, we want to more have a dynamic benefit that coming from the political discourse, because we think that the political discourse is very needed to be more analytical, like the contribution needed to be more fair or engage with the current problem that exists in this world, right? We say that the majority of the leftism today believe that the market, or even the world competitive things, or and so on and so far, some kind of should have, like the feature of any future socialist society is beside to the point that the fact, like the world isn't that perfect. So it's very hard for you if you are coming from the idealist, idealist personality. It's going to be more hard to create certain problem, or to create certain, a progressive and so on and so far. Also, ladies and gentlemen, OO mentioned that they want to taking care about the issues, but OG said to you that the utopia, leftism, with their overly idealistic only going to stop the progressive that happening in status quo, that's very backlash with their cases or even their goals that they want to achieve in this debate, right? But before coming to my substantive extension, coming from the extension that I want to broach in this debate, I want to deliver some rebuttal towards the OO cases. The first thing is that they say they underestimate the ideal of idealistic. It's very bad for improving, they say. Ladies and gentlemen, by proposing this, it will only by support or even associate the leftism from the utopia will only create not only not healthy and and not going to improve the quality of the political discourse. Why, ladies and gentlemen? Because the most outcome coming from the leftist utopian is because they are overly want or hope for something that's very great that never going to be happen. The output, it's only going to create certain extreme protests, for example, and so on and so far, rather to create the analytical things about the regulation, or even the greatest things coming from, like creating or contribution that have to be put at the very first place in the political discourse in itself, right? So what is happening if you're going to also they mentioned that what is happening, the abandon that coming from the OG, they said it's going only to cannot create the betterment. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, it will create the betterment. Why? Because they will be more realistic. They will be realized on how the chaos that happening in the world right now. So they're not going to only creating or having some fantasy on the great dreams and so on and so far. And also they believe that by associate this leftism will create more certain topic that's very booming nowadays in the status quo, for example, like the climate change can be solved, for example. But we say, ladies and gentlemen, to you, as I said before, that being the realistic sometimes make you cannot wake up and face the truth, and hence the contribution is be more or less in the end of the day. Ladies and gentlemen, OG has brought to you about why it is very bad to portray the leftism, the leftist as the utopic in the political discourses. And gentlemen, because I believe that JJ already brought in her speech. What we say to you that in the political discourse we need something. We need to do more incentive and create things based on the logic things. Like the characteristic that's happening in our current status quo, and then we need to be more discussion, like open-minded things on how we are going to solve the current problem, and so on so far. So it will create the more output that need to be, can apply in this world, not in the world that perfect, that like being hoped by the leftist utopic, right? And also we already proved to you about why it's very improving the quality of the political discourse in itself, also the leftist utopic, ladies and gentlemen, because we say it's very far with the current condition in our status quo, when the financial is very struggling. For example, any chaos that happening need to be like gaining more global concern, that need to be struggling to create the data agenda, not only protest about the current chaos, and not wake up from our dreams, that hope our world it's going to be more perfect, there's no chaos, and so on and so forth. With this statement coming from coming from my first, it will create the betterment and also the quality that that can create leftist people even better. Because in our side we understand we understand the rightists better, and do not only demonize the rightists, because more utopic world, it's that mean that you're only hoping for something that's not realistic, and hence the contribution is because of that. I beg to propose.
All right, thank you very much for Deputy Prime Minister. Now I would like to call Deputy Leader of Opposition. Here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Yeah, I just want to say that POI through unmute. I highly encourage CG to making POI. Please, if it's already like 5 and I haven't like take your POI, please just remind me of it. Wait, yeah. Wait for a second. Hmm. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. So things I'm going to bring you how this actually, how this actually improve like political discourse, but secondly, how we're able to achieve like better like a better like objective for like this leftist people through like political agenda or through like their movement in the end of itself, right? Most of my point is going to like like this like directly clash with what OG has been, but one rebuttal towards whole OG case. Because basically what OG tells you is that currently like now the discussion is basically is coming into like an analytical or etc. I don't know, right? But they never prove actually like giving a reason why this is not something that's is analytical, or like giving like a conspiracy is something that's actually used for like these leftist people to begin with, right? Because we say currently right now the status quo or the discussion that's coming from Utopia or leftists such as Bernie Sanders or like AOC or their followers in itself is something that is fact-based proof, right? This is something that they actually really highly encourage. For example, Bernie, when actually criticized McDonald creating class, they actually giving proof why they never actually raise the salary of McD. It's because the Republican backed this McD, and McD have done a lot of like lobbying, etc. Right? Many people when giving like Black Lives Matter movement also give you like many proof why black is actually oppressed. Right? This is something fact in itself. Right? The one that actually giving like analytical it's the right conservative one that base their self of like on conspiracy like back from like Trump in itself, right? And we as a leftist is actually championing the rational one. So I think that most of like their harm about how this is going to be analytical is something that's actually untrue, right? Because if leftists want to actually create and actually really actually want to inject people mind, they need to have like this analytical and prove them with data that they are the correct one, right? So how do we actually improve the discourse, right? I think that how do we actually improve the discourse into turn into like leftist one, right? I think that currently like now most of the time right now there are gonna be a lot of like political apathy they're coming from like opening government, right? Even though because they want to have like this, analytical and meaningful discussion. So I accept that this is going to be like something like cooperative. Therefore, you're likely to have like this compromising stand or etc. Right? We say that this is something that is actually unlucrative for many people, right? Many people, because basically it is just simply boring for them, right? Simply boring, because what you will talk is something a policy that talks about like 2,000 pages that many people do not actually have time to begin with, right? You need to actually trigger this discussion by actually pumping into like intuition that's coming from people, right? I think that Evita already clearly gives you like two people analysis that they give, right? Number one is the moderates, right? Moderates currently right now are actually very apathetical, because basically they do not trust the government, right? They do not trust the government right now. As currently right now, not many changes happen. Even though the Biden administration happened, they do not actually giving many changes. Many of the promises such as student loan or debt is something that they actually never received to begin with, right? And most importantly, these moderates also likely poor and facing this kinds of oppressive and usually oppressed by these kinds of capitalist people to begin with, right? So you inject and worker class, therefore you inject the intuition by giving them the reason and a feeling of relatability towards the oppression that they have, so they are likely to subscribe to this narrative. So you create the political discussion first, right? In their side, this is never going to happen, because they need to actually understand many of the data in itself, right? But in our side, we make them pump intuition first by giving them the world that they wanted to first, and giving them the proof of it, and proof of it that this is actually happening currently right now. It's confirming their belief, so they are likely to make this in the very first place, right? In the very first place. But secondly, it's currently right now younger generation is becoming more progressive in the end of the day. Therefore, they are likely to subscribe it. If we don't have this, therefore they are likely to just simply think that the government do not want to change. They are compromising, as many of like them is like being conservative right now. Nancy Pelosi or etc. is also conservative, and they are not likely to make change. So therefore, they are not going to discussion at first. So if you want to trigger discussion, you need to have this kinds of narrative for leftism in the end of the day, right? But how we actually change the shift into like the leftist in itself, right? I think the moment that you have already enough support by people by injecting into like their intuition, I think you can have like mass structural change in the way that the politician actually going to work. Because many politician work is actually going to be increased by this kinds of voters to begin with, right? Therefore, you see when moment that AOC creating this utopian narrative, you see that many people are subscribing into it. Many progressive are actually subscribing into it. Therefore, they're able to have quite amount of base to actually push a certain policy, or make Biden giving like progressive promise, even though they never actually do, and make Sanders is actually the one that is being chosen in like political primary, right? Political primary, right? Therefore, and Kamala Harris to become the vice president in the end of itself, right? Therefore, we think that because this is not going to happen in their side of the house, because the moment that you dissociate themselves, it means that you are going to like crashing down all of these kinds of narrative. It means that you are going to let many conservative and seniors such as Nancy Pelosi, a Democrats, is very centrism of like Hillary Clinton in itself, to actually going to be dominant in discussion. And these leftist politicians do not have the power to actually show their leverage in the end of itself, right? We think that Republican is not something that is actually should be taken into account on this debate, right? Because they are going to accuse us and criticize us no matter what happened. No matter what happened, even if we are not, leftist in the end of the day. They call Biden that is centrist, a communist, or like someone like that, and they always find fault in us because simply they are rival to us, right? So therefore, this argument is not as well. It's come in both sides anyway, right? But we think that when you have this like utopia, and many people, as I already told you currently right now, are starting to shifting towards it, because they believe that the government needs change and more equality needs, especially with the current growing middle class in like many countries that believe that they are being oppressed. Therefore, you are likely to making change in how also Republican also want to champion a certain policy. Therefore, you have this kinds of Republican is actually proposing their healthcare system in Trump to actually appeal towards the voter of Obama that is not being countered by Hillary Clinton, right? You create a protectionist policy that is actually aligned with like leftist agenda, because they see that import is not something that is good, right? Even though even though they did maybe a small step, but this is giving a structural change about how like the politician is actually going to work in the very first place. If you do not have this, you are likely to actually just find in a stagnant phase with political apathy to begin with. We're very proud to oppose.
All right, thank you very much for Deputy Leader of Oppositions. Now I'd like to call government member here.
So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the government. This is the member of the government. We would like to argue that we definitely agree with the motions. So basically, why we do agree with the motions that we should disassociate this leftism from utopia is because we know that leftism is the ideology, or basically the value that contains this freedom, equality, and all the progressive ideology that basically can bring more harm to the society and also individual. It cannot be controlled by the state. And also, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to say that this ideal society under the name of utopia, or the perfectionism of this ideal society, cannot be achieved if we do support this leftism, because leftism, or those who have this ideology, basically they do adopt this value that is absolutely different from their state's value, which can result into liberalism, which can bring harm to the society, because the state cannot control what is going to happen, or what changes can be made into society, so that it can bring more harm to the society. And yeah, I think that's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for government member. Now I'd like to call opposition member here.
Okay, let me set my timer first. Okay, my gender preference is he or him, and if you like to give for POI, please just open up your mic because I won't see the chat box. Thank you. Now I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we already know like the definition of utopia itself, which is an imaginary society, place, or state considered to be perfect or ideal. Now, this first definition of ideology is being proposed by Plato, which is already like 1,000 years old ago, right? And since Plato first proposed the definition of ideology, there are a lot of ideologies such as the, egalitarian, liberalism, capitalism, and other ideology which arise after Plato left the world. And now those all of those ideology are being implemented in the utopian itself, the utopian concept itself, because utopian in the real sense of the definition itself focus on quality in such a category as such as economics, government, justice, etc., with the method and structure of proposed implementation based on varying ideology. Now in here, I want to emphasize the words on varying ideology. Now in here, I want to explain like why leftism cannot be separated with utopia in political discourse, and why it will be more benefit to the figure and the society who do the political discourse. First, because the leftism ideology itself is already been incorporated within the utopia ideology. Now, we all know that utopia ideology wants to make a society, wants to make a state, wants to make a country where there isn't any racism, where all people are equal, and those beliefs are aligned with the belief that is in the leftism ideology. But the difference is that the utopia try to implement various ideology, not only like one specific ideology itself. Now, the second reason why leftism cannot be separated with utopia is that if the leftism ideology disassociate with the utopia ideology, then what is the difference of that when it's being compared with liberalism or like any other ideology? Because the leftism ideology itself that is implemented in the utopia concept is acting as a counterbalance of the other ideology, so that the other ideology doesn't have a full main control of the concept of utopia itself. And the third reason is that the figure that do the political can use it to attract people to support them in the political discourse, especially like the left, just because if those figures, those individuals do the political discourse with limiting a specific ideology because they think the leftism ideology are bad or any ideology are bad, that which they are limited, they will limit their chance of being elected, because usually people do political discourse if they wanted to be chosen as, I don't know, the member of the government or maybe like even the president, right? And those individuals, those figures want to attract as much as people as possible, like, and they do not want to like limit the person that they attract by disassociate the concept of leftism itself within the concept of the utopia. Now, the fourth argument that I will tell you all is that there will be a discussion limit in the political discourse if we dissociate the leftism ideology with the utopia ideology, and the leftists cannot participate in the political discourse then, which is aligned with the third argument or the third reason that I already elaborated. Now, continuing to my fifth argument is that the opening government said that the political discourse will be more progressive and will be more dynamic if we dissociate the leftism concept with the concept of utopia itself. But here, I would like to rebuttal that point, because we from the closing opposition fully believe that the political discourse cannot be progressive and cannot be dynamics without implementing leftism concept in it, because realism without idealism will not move on. So the main reason that the opening government branch and also like the closing government branch decided on the reason why they want to disassociate the leftism concept with the utopia concept itself, because they think that the leftism people dream too high to create an ideal world where there is no class, and those dream kind of people do not move far. But in here, we from the closing opposition believe that if those people have those kind of dreams, then they want to try hard to like make those dreams realistic, right? And they can associate that dreams with other various ideologies such as the liberalism, capitalism, to make those dreams come true. Although like there isn't any utopian country in the world itself, but at least there are countries where like the government system are near perfect, such that a near perfect compared to like the concept of the utopia itself. Now, the sixth argument that I would like to tell you guys, it's that associating the leftism ideology with the utopia concept will be as associating the leftism ideology with the utopia concept will be act as a balancing ring with the figure that use the ideology that counter the leftism, because if we like disassociated the leftism ideology itself from the utopia concept in the like political discourse, then there will be like a decreasing number of the figures who believe in the leftism ideology. And what if like those figures who believe in the leftism ideology didn't participate in the political discourse, and only people who believe in the liberalism ideology, or maybe like any other ideology that participate in the political discourse, then there will be like what is called monopolization like of in the political discourse itself. And we cannot do that, because a lot of people use the concept of democracy itself, and democracy doesn't limit any ideology to participate in the political acts. And if we dissociated the leftism ideology with the utopia concept itself, then not only like there will be a monopolization from the counteract of the leftism people, but also it will hurt the principle of the democracy itself, which enable all of people with various ideology to participate in the political discourse. So as of that argument, we are boldly oppose this motion. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for oppositions member. Now to close the entire bench from government side of the house, I would like to call government whip. Here.
Am I audible?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay. So if you have POI, please state it in the comments. I would like to see that. And then I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Good evening, the Honorable Educator, also ladies and gentlemen, member of this House. The motion of today's debate is this House prefers narrative that dissociate leftism from utopia in political discourse, and we as the government team definitely agree with this motion. So the opening from government and also the opening from opposition keep debating about leftism and rightism and how leftism is better than rightism and how leftism is actually worse than rightism. As the government, I would like to take neutral side and stating about how the opening government already stated that utopia is an ideal world that didn't exist. However, the opposition team keeps saying that keep stating as if utopia is something that we can achieve, when actually he also quoted Plato and stated that when Plato also stated that it is actually cannot possible to be exist. Then the thing about the leftism and rightism, I would like to state by stating that the opposition team keeps saying how leftism is more progressive and etc. etc. When the actual thing is, in the political industry, there is a thing called spectrum where actually there is the rightism and leftism. What you need to know about the leftism itself, it is not as liberal, as progressive as if in the past. So as an example, we already know how Hillary and Trump battling against each other and how actually the vote didn't have that much different. The reason is because the leftism itself, because Hillary actually support genocide, which is actually wrong in the progressive side, and then also how Biden actually cares about the economy more than the environment. As I would like to rebuttal the speaker from the opposition before, how actually the party from the leftism, from the progressive party, start to actually get close to the rightism spectrum. So we cannot say that actually the leftism party it is could be able to create a utopia which did not exist. And then my speaker already stated about how the leftism adopt the value that result into liberalism and how keep talking leftism is progressive, as I already stated before. And then the speaker from the opening kept stating about how utopia is only how utopia is possible when it is only hoping that is something that is not realistic. When we're talking about politics, we're focusing on what voters wanted, what people wanted, not what the party wanted. When we're talking about the people wanted, what the voters wanted, we're talking about how utopia is actually wanted by both party in leftism and rightism. However, we recognize that by dissociating the leftism from rightism is actually getting more good than harm, because when we're talking about something that is ideal for both people, leftism and rightism is different. Yes, please.
Our case basically told you that we can get more progressive policy, not create a progressive, an ideal world like what you said, right?
Excuse me, can you repeat that? I cannot hear it clearly.
Our case is that how we can actually get more progressive policy, which currently right now do not have in status quo, using this narrative, not creating an ideal world like what you accuse currently.
But that is actually what I've already heard from your opening position. And I already stated also how the leftism is actually not as progressive as it should be. That is actually also the reason why in the USA, for example, there is a party called Green Party, which is actually more progressive than the leftism itself. So we're actually talking about how leftism is not as progressive as it would be and in the political spectrum. And also, I would like to state, as for the closing, I would like to state that we as the government team actually agree that we dissociate leftism from utopia in political discourse, because as the ideal world that even though we cannot achieve, people from the rightism and leftism should be wanting the idea of the ideal world, and even though they're actually contradictory to each other, it should be disassociate. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for government whip. Now to close the entire debate, I would like to call opposition whip. Here.
I'm audible.
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, hello everyone. My gender pronounce is he or him. And you guys want to start any kind of POI, please kindly unmute yourself because I won't see the chat box. And I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Okay, good evening, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen. So the case of this utopia thing is like, if we come back again to the fundamental of the basic utopia brings by this motion is like a perfect world, like there will be a society that will be a highly desirable or like a nearly perfect world, like a nearly perfect quality for its citizens or for each persons in that kind of society. And like bringing again to this kind of world that something that whether or not this can be achieved or not, but sometimes this kind of concept of utopia itself is something that needs to be talking about, like whether it is can be achieved or not. But in the under of our house, that this kind of utopia, if we back again to the other the motion itself, like it is needed to be associated from the leftism itself, because the leftism can be actually playing a role itself, like my first speaker already said to you, that this utopia is basically something that need something to like limitate those kind of implementation in the political discourse itself. Like this utopia, if like there's no like leftism that in a utopia, that this concept of the utopia political discourses is like a fully something that not making a social equity of like those leftism brings up of the implementation of the utopia itself, and also bring into like the socialists as well, the socialists as well, like bringing all the persons that have those kind of rights to do anything that including in social aspects, economical, and a lot of stuff in the political discourse itself. And this is what we think that it could be more like achievable. It could be more implementation and actualization of the utopian political discourse if we keep associate this kind of leftism in the concept of the utopia in a political discourse. And then the point that we want to like set it here is like we want to create some kind of limited of this kind of utopia political discourse. It will become something that which people want to like having those kind of or desirable needs to achieve everything that they want is like achievable. And those things, if we keeping this associate of this leftism in the use of the political discourses, like there will be no like which parties or which political actor that they can do something based on what they interested with. But this kind of leftism will be creating another perspective of this kind of utopia political discourse to be creating a more like beneficial, more like a lot of perspective of this utopia to create more of political conditions in which of the society will bring more reasonable of the achievement of this political discourse if we implementing or actualize or maybe like associate this kind of leftism perspective of this utopia, rather than just keeping of some kind of side of the utopia based to continue based on what one perspective to create a real something of achievable or highly desirable society where this is not basically not limited by something that will be creating more idealist, but also to realist. It will be create some social like equity between all amongst all the peoples in those society to have those rights to implement those kind of political discourse in a concept of the utopia itself. And then this utopia things, if we like come back again to the real to the real fundamental of to the real explanation, like the philosophy of this utopia world of the utopia society, that which of these Plato want to like achieving some work where this all the people can achieving everything that they need, like can achieving everything that they want, some can create some peaceful and maybe like I ideal world where which people can get everything that they want, and this if we like keeping this going under like this utopia itself, but not like having those kind of interference of this another ideological of this leftism creating include in this kind of utopia, will not like bringing a real or the ideal or ideological basic on those utopia where we being from the first time itself, like my first already said. There's no such thing like a democracy will always creating like a few freedom for each people to achieving those kind of political discourse, or each like political actors to actualize or to implement like their political things based on the one ideological that as they use as a concept of the principle of this utopia itself. They need some kind of this leftism that always have those kind of different perspective of this to achieve those utopian political discourse, to create a balance of the figure of the political discourse, to will be have those each equity, if just have the social equality, they support it, and also will supporting in the which sides of this political act to want to achieve those political discourse in the concept of this utopian world. Like in this utopia in a relation of this kind of political discourse has a really great influence on this political utopia in the modern world, like we all see in the way that we really want to keeping to shift this kind of utopia situation in the political discourse in general of the utopia from the early major modern period to the like 20th century that we facing right now, that this kind of condition is like have some criticism, injustice, inequality, and criticism, and that's why we think that this kind of leftism in a utopia political discourse, this will be proposed some institution to ensure better and more just like a social change in the history of like political utopia itself as the idealism of the form of the state, and that's why we strongly oppose the motion. Thank you.